You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey vet rehabbers, welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Kelly, and today we've got digital marketing expert, Eric Garcia. He's from the United States, and he's going to be chatting to us about a topic which I'm so excited about because I think it's a topic that we really all need help with. So he's talking about social media. Eric, thanks so much for joining me.
I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Megan.
Eric, tell us a little bit about you because, you know, most of the time when I read blogs and I listen to people that are in social media, they generally just general social media, but you really focused in on the veterinary market, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I actually started my career working in a busy 12-doctor veterinary practice here in Florida, which is where I'm from, while going through university. And, working in that practice, I had an opportunity to learn the veterinary market. I started off just as an assistant right out of high school. Eventually, as I started to gain more knowledge in university, the practice decided to want me to use the skills that I was learning to help their practice, and eventually worked my way up into a management role in that veterinary practice by doing some really great things in the world of not just social media and social media marketing, but also in terms of better utilizing technology to connect with pet owners and to make the practice more efficient. And then after working in that veterinary practice for about a decade, I had the opportunity to become the vice president of a veterinary exclusive marketing firm. We eventually sold that firm. And then 10 years ago this May, I started Simply Done Tech Solutions, where that's all I do is I work exclusively with veterinary practices to help them enhance their digital marketing communication strategies. Very fortunate to work with practices all over the world because, as you very well know, being in South Africa and me being in the US, no matter where we are in the world today, the way that we communicate with one another has changed. And social media is a vital part of that. So it's an industry I grew up in and I continue to dedicate my career to and I love. It allows me to spend time also learning about the ever-evolving side of the veterinary industry.
Now, one thing about social media, it can be quite overwhelming and quite daunting because there's so many different platforms, first of all, and everything is always changing. So do you recommend for veterinary practices and vet rehab therapists to choose a few platforms or to try and just spread yourself over everywhere so you have sort of a contact with people in all different platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm actually glad you asked because I think for most practices, it's very overwhelming right now. What people don't realize is that there are hundreds of social media networks globally. And so when we think about WhatsApp and Blogger and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter, it's very easy to become overwhelmed and think at some point, well, where am I going to have time to communicate on all of these platforms when my time is very limited? And for me, my recommendation will never be to try to be everywhere. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes veterinary practices and professionals make is that they take a lot of pride in displaying on their website that they are everywhere, that they're communicating on all of the social media channels that exist. And the issue with that is that when we spread ourselves too thin, we start to dilute the quality of content that we're producing because we're so limited on time and we're trying to come up with content that's specific for Twitter, which is, say, entirely different than Instagram and slightly different than Facebook. And so we spend too much time diluting ourselves, and therefore the quality of conversations that are being produced often fail to engage clients. So for me, my recommendation is to be where our pet owners are at. And by far, that is Facebook. Facebook is at 2 billion users globally. And followed by that, Instagram, which is at 1 billion users globally. And then followed by that would be YouTube. But before you try to take part of all three at one time, start with Facebook. That is by far where a majority of our pet owners are at on a daily basis. Utilize that effectively. And once you feel comfortable with it, then add in Instagram and apply what you know that works well on Facebook. And then if you have additional time from that point, then adding a video element like YouTube can only certainly help.
It's really interesting, you know, I mean, because obviously the business that I have is an online education business. So it's very different to a vet rehab therapist practice, which is a brick and mortar business. And, you know, you want to obviously attract the people around you or quite close to you. And you know, so often when I'm thinking about what the members and what vet rehab therapists, where they should be posting, Facebook has always been the one for me, which is the best, because also you have that ability to be able to boost posts. You can do ads where you can actually target your area. And one thing I've been finding, just, you know, we also use Twitter, but it just seems like every post is just diluted. Like the chance of anyone seeing a post is just so slim, because, you know, you post it and then you can actually just refresh and your post is so far down and nobody sees it. And I always wonder, you know, I see loads of posts on Twitter for vet rehab therapists, and I wonder, is there actually a return for them on the investment of the time that they're spending posting these Twitter posts? Because in my mind, Twitter is more sort of international. It's not regional. Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Twitter is most certainly a very global social media platform. But the way that most people look at Twitter is Twitter doesn't have such a huge role to play in for small businesses, such as you know, most veterinary practices, or especially rehab. It's for me more about larger presence for major companies like airline industries, hotel industries, and it's more as an extension of their customer service efforts. And then also individual brands, so more people that are trying to build a name for themselves, and news organizations as well. And so if you look at a majority of the conversation that's happening on Twitter, you see more of that and far less a small business. And you're right, you know, I question that as well, is if we're spending all of this time producing content, what is the return on somewhere like Twitter? When I lecture at conferences or when I consult with practices in the very early stages of social media, I would work with them on Twitter. But as we started to see less engagement from Twitter than we did Facebook at the time, and subsequently other social media networks, I've since removed Twitter from all of my presentations. I've removed Twitter from my consultation series, because the last thing I want to do is tell a practice that in theory you should be there because people are there, if we know that the data doesn't support that they're engaging on a consistent basis. So I would encourage your listeners to take the effort that they're using on Twitter and perhaps evolve that to fit a platform like Facebook.
And what about LinkedIn, Eric?
LinkedIn's a great opportunity especially for rehab specialists to more so not necessarily network with other pet owners, although they'll reach some of those pet owners. But for me, it's about them being able to network with their referring veterinary community. So the veterinarians within any given community that your specialists are reaching are on LinkedIn for the most part. And so we know it's a great place for the rehab specialists to be able to go out there. And I encourage to share the stories of the patients that they're caring for and that they're seeing with their LinkedIn followers. So this way, when veterinarians are looking to learn more about that rehab specialist, they not only get to learn more about them, but they actually get to see the quality of their work. They get to see the impact that they're able to make in these pets' lives. And at the end of the day, that helps build trust with the veterinarians that ultimately are going to consider referring to them. And it also allows that rehab specialist to keep up to date with existing veterinarians that may already refer with latest things that they might be doing to evolve the level of care that they provide or streamline their workflow and communications with clients. So absolutely, I highly encourage it as an opportunity, but more communicate with your peers at this point.
So what I'm really hearing is that we should be choosing platforms, and they're for different target markets. So it's not really advisable to be, posting on exactly the same as you're posting on LinkedIn, the words that you're using on Facebook. You can use similar content, but you're going to be using different words because you're actually attracting and trying to connect with different markets. So the Facebook and Instagram would be more the pet owners, our potential clients, And then LinkedIn, we're looking at professionals who potentially be referring to us.
Absolutely. And one thing that you pointed out that's important to understand as well, is similar content, but maybe different words. And that's important to understand, because if you don't think about it that way, then what you're looking at now is, now you're telling me I have to use Facebook and LinkedIn, and now I have to come up with content for both. But you can use the same stories that we know help engage people, but we're just going to maybe approach it differently when we're communicating the story to the individual person, whether it's a pet owner and how we might communicate that story to them versus a referring veterinarian or potentially referring veterinarian. But we're using the same core content. So that way we can streamline, at the end of the day, our workflow and enhance our message to the audience that we're trying to come across.
So chatting a little bit about, you were saying obviously Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, those are our big three. So we had a team meeting the other day, and what the lady that does our website, our web developer and designer, she said to me, like, what about Snapchat? Are we on Snapchat? And I was like, what is Snapchat? And I suddenly realized, because ages ago, because I was in that generation who'd come through with cell phones and computers and everything, like we were on Facebook, we knew everything, what was happening, and we were teaching everybody else how to use it. Now I've sort of gone up a few generations, and there's this younger generation that's coming through. And one of the questions that I have is that, should we be looking at different platforms to attract all the different generations? Because, we know that the very older generation, some of them are on Facebook, they don't really know how to use it. Then there's my generation who's on Facebook. And now these younger people that are coming potentially have pets. Are they on Facebook, or are they on other platforms that we're going to have to now start to add in,
Yeah, so it's great that you mentioned that, because oftentimes I'll actually get that question where practices will come up to me and they'll say, Eric, this is great. Facebook's awesome. I get it. Instagram's great. But, my kids, I don't have kids, but I'm saying, my audience, they'll say, well, my kids or my grandkids, they're using things like Snapchat. Should we be utilizing platforms like that to reach that future generation of pet owners that we're actually already seeing in our practices? And so my response to that is typically how do I put this? That's to look at the future. I feel like that's my job. My job is to look and see where pet owners are engaging, what channels are coming up, which ones are sticking, which ones are not sticking, and to communicate that to the veterinary community and say, okay, here's this new social media network. Here's the number of people that we see using it. It's time to use it. I think the biggest mistake that practices make, and I actually, it's a mistake, but I'm happy to see the enthusiasm, is that they try to forecast what the next social media channel will be, and they'll start spending more time focusing on that channel without knowing the type of conversation that we're going to get from pet owners, and if it's even going to be worth our time. So I'll give you the example of Snapchat. We know that the younger generation is using Snapchat. In theory, it sounds great. But if you look at Snapchat's core user base, their core users are between 16 to 18 years old, and that's not necessarily our demographic. So if a veterinary practice is using Snapchat as a means to communicate with pet owners, we know that the core demographic that they're reaching isn't necessarily who our target audience is right now. In addition to that, Snapchat's numbers in terms of growth have been stunted for a very long time. They were growing very, very rapidly. But social media right now is very much a cutthroat industry. And what I mean by that is, when challengers like Facebook see someone like Snapchat coming, they look and see what they're doing well and how they can apply that to their own social media network. And so if you think about Snapchat and all of the fun features that people use, like the filters and the content that disappears after 24 hours, the things that made Snapchat well known, well, Instagram started applying those same features. And when they started doing that and Instagram users started using it, well, Snapchat's numbers then stunted. And so if a practice was to move all of their efforts to Snapchat and start neglecting or not using the other networks as efficiently, Well, now they've spent all this time communicating to an audience that isn't really there for the most part. And so I always tell practices, it is important to look ahead, absolutely, but we have to make sure that any social media network that we think our youngest clients might be interested in is going to stick. And the other thing I'll say to that is there's a lot of studies that prove that our youngest generation, so our millennials, our youngest pet owners, they have been trying to leave Facebook. And what I mean by that is they want to go somewhere else. But all of these studies that prove that they want to go somewhere else also prove that they continue to go back to Facebook and that they're still logging in multiple times a day. But I'd argue that, but they are using other social platforms like Instagram, where the core demographic is younger, but old enough to be our pet owners. And so that's why it's important to use Facebook, because our oldest demographic is definitely there, as well as some of our youngest demographic, but then use something like Instagram where our youngest pet owners are there utilizing it. So that's a long way of saying, I love what I do because I get to look at that and say, what's going to be here to stick? And then when I see something new that's going to be here to stick, then I communicate that through the publications or blogging and things like that.
Okay, so we just got to follow you. We just got to make sure we follow you.
That's a roundabout way of saying
that. Stick to Facebook and Instagram for the moment until you tell us otherwise. No, that actually simplifies things, because you're always thinking, questioning, should I, where should I be? And I think that if you can just focus on two platforms, I think that not that many people are on YouTube in the vet rehab market. I don't know what it's like in the veterinary industry. And I want to chat about video a little bit later. But I think most of the vet rehab therapists, they definitely are on Facebook and on Instagram. So I thought maybe we can hone in on each of those individually, starting with Facebook. Recently, it's probably not even that recent anymore. It was over a year ago, I think, where there was all the algorithm changes, and there's all this fear about don't post this, and you're not allowed to say these words because then you're going to get this bad score, and it's all this fear around what to do and how many times to post. Should you post 4 times a day, twice a day, once a day? So I'd love you to give us some advice about just how many times to post, what type of content we should be posting.
Yeah, so to lead that conversation, I think it's best to start off by just explaining the algorithm and how it works as a core, and some of the changes that Facebook made that further the importance of understanding how the algorithm works. And I think at the end of the day, when we think about how often we're posting and the type of quality content that we're going to be posting, if you can always think about what I'm about to explain, then you'll be successful, because I think this is perhaps one of the most important pieces to the entire social media strategy. So the way Facebook's algorithm works is essentially Facebook shows each of us as individuals. So take our businesses out of the equation. They show you and I content that they believe we are most interested in. And the way that they determine how we're interested in this content is based off of how we engage with the friends, family members, and the businesses that we follow. So to kind of explain how that works, let's just pretend for a second that me, you, and all of your listeners are friends on Facebook. We're all friends. We all socialize with one another. And say that when I post pictures on Facebook personally, and you're friends with me, say that I share mostly pictures of my dogs or the things that I'm doing when I'm traveling to a veterinary conference and all the fun that I end up having doing that. And say for the most part, you like my content. And what I mean by that is you literally like it. Or now on Facebook, you can love it, wow it, sad it, angry, right? So any one of those emotions are considered a like. If you do that, or if you comment, or even if you don't comment or like, but you're one of those people who uses Facebook just to see what everyone else is doing, but you don't say anything. So maybe you just click on the pictures that I'm sharing. If you do any one of those 3 things consistently, what you're doing is you're training Facebook that you're interested in what I have to say. So moving forward, what's going to happen is Facebook's going to show you more content that comes from me because they believe that you're interested in what I have to say. But let's say you're the kind of person that maybe all you do is you share pictures of the food you eat or the different coffee you drink. And maybe you used to go to fun restaurants, but now you eat fast food and your coffee is just a picture of a black cup of coffee, nothing exciting. And I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, Megan posted another picture of some food that I'm not interested in. This is so boring. And I scroll past it. By scrolling past it and ignoring most of your content, what I'm doing is I'm showing Facebook that I'm not as interested in what you have to say. So moving forward, I'm going to see less content that comes from you. Doesn't mean that I'll never see content that comes from you, but I'll just see less of it. So why is this important to understand? Because that same rule of thumb applies to your own rehab page. If you're sharing content that is not interesting to the pet owner and they're not liking, commenting, clicking, sharing any of the content that you're sharing, that you're posting, then what's going to happen is Facebook isn't going to show it to the people that are following you. So it might be great that you have 500 or 1,000 followers, but it means nothing unless you can deliver engaging content consistently. So that leads me to my next point. Well, what's engaging content? You know, what should we share? What shouldn't we share? What do pet owners find boring? So I have a lot to say about this, but I'll distill it down into this. When it comes to sharing content, especially about the benefit of what rehab specialists can do or the opportunity that exists, I want to see less facts and statistics. I don't want to see the percentage of golden retrievers that might have some sort of osteoarthritis or mobility issues, and how rehab can help with the percentage of that it affects those dogs. We as a society, no matter where we are in this world, don't respond well to statistics and facts. As scientists, it sounds great, right? That's what you went to school to do. You learn facts and statistics. You thrive on that. That's how well you respond. That's your language. But to the common pet owner, it doesn't engage them. So if a rehab specialist were to go on Facebook and say, 54% of golden retrievers will get osteoarthritis at the age of 7 or over, our pet owners aren't saying, oh, I should call a rehab specialist. This is something that, I need to look at. Instead, what it's doing is our pet owners aren't doing anything. What I want to see instead is the story of the golden retriever or the dog or the cat that you're actually able to help. Studies prove that we remember information when it's woven into a narrative 22 times more than facts alone, right? So if you were to tell me a story, I'm more likely to engage and remember that story than you sharing a fact or a statistic. And the story is what gets people to feel good. So I have a lot of practices that have a rehab specialist only page, and they're sharing pictures of the dogs and the cats that are coming in and how they're progressing by going through rehabilitation. And to see the story of the senior dog or the dog that had some sort of orthopedic surgery that was not moving well, but you can see through the benefit of rehabilitation is starting to move better and is happy and it's wagging its tail. That's what tugs on our heartstrings. That's what makes us feel good. That's what shows me the benefit of what you can do. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to get likes. That's what's going to get comments. That's what's going to get other pet owners to share your content. And that is important to be able to engage pet owners, where right now, most practices are still obsessed with the facts and statistics, and we know it's not working.
So sort of more real content. So what's really happening at the practice? And what about posting about, the team? Like I always sort of feel like we have quite a good connection with our clients because we spend quite a lot of time with them. And one of my thoughts is that if we share quite a lot about what we're doing and how we're involved and pictures of us, that when they eventually come to us, they'll feel like they know us already.
100%. Absolutely. That's a big part of why your clients are following you on social media. They love you. They want to see more of you. They want to see more of you in your element doing what you love. And that's a huge part of it. Even stopping on a Friday afternoon and just taking a selfie with you and your team saying, we're here working hard for you. Those things go a long way at engaging your clients that are already coming to you, engaging people who are considering your services and are just doing research about you and get to see who you are, or your existing clients to build a better relationship. And so absolutely highly encourage that, far more than sharing some sort of stolen image that you've taken off of Google of a pretend doctor, which unfortunately I see many practices also falling victim to. But I definitely encourage that by all means.
So we know now what type of content we should be sharing. Now, how often should we be sharing it? So, I remember years ago, it was like you should have at least 2 posts a day, and there was those kind of things. But, then you start running out of content. So would you rather us post less and more quality posts than be posting and having sort of some presence there every single day?
100%. And I think that's one of the mistakes that practices make. And unfortunately, in my opinion, there's a lot of false information that's given to veterinary practices when it comes to this. At the end of the day, here's my recommendation. Do what you can with the time that you have. Obviously, the more the better, but reality says that, and I remember this in working with practices, say you're having a really busy day. There's just too much going on. You're behind on appointments. And maybe you set a goal that every Wednesday you're going to post something, but you're too busy to post and you just don't have time. My recommendation is to leave it alone. Leave it alone until you're ready to come back to it, to write something that's going to be effective and that's going to engage your followers. The biggest mistake practices make is they say, I'm going to post 3 times a week, and they force themselves to post 3 times a week. But because they do it in a very rushed manner, all they're doing is they're sharing content that fails to engage pet owners. And we already know the dangers of doing that, because if you share content just to make yourself feel better, just to put something out there because you think it's better than nothing, if you share too much boring content, remember, Facebook's going to start to penalize you and not show your content to most of your followers. So I typically recommend, as long as you understand that, try to aim between 2 to 3 postings a week. Just as you said, I would much rather focus on the quality of the content that you're producing rather than how often you're producing the content. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to remember. So yes, set a goal that you think is realistic, but also leave yourself some flexibility to have some wiggle room. When I consult with practices and we have a consultation and I give them tasks, okay, here's what you should be doing. Post 2 to 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks, and then we'll talk again a month later. When we talk again a month later and I see that they've only posted once or twice, I celebrate that. I say, oh, you must have been busy. That's okay. I would much rather see that than you post something that's not engaging. But then I'll see, when they have time again, because we all go through loops, that they'll start to gather good content and start to push it out there.
What about generic versus shared posts? So like creating your own posts versus sharing other people's posts. What kind of split should you be sharing other people's posts, and what kind of split should you have between those two?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, the content that you can produce yourself is going to be far more engaging. So the more that you can gather your own content is ideal. I'm not against sharing content from another page at least once a week. If it's something that's truly engaging, something that's truly interesting. But when you share content, one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you to get most of your clients to engage with a shared post is not to just click on share and then say, look at this, which is what some practices do, or not just click on share and not say anything. Instead, whatever it is that you're sharing, I want you to endorse it. So maybe you're sharing a post that you think is interesting. I want you to click on share, but then I want you to say something like, I highly recommend that you read this because this is something that we also believe in, or this is something that I believe will help your pet. When you do that, I see far more clients that actually read or click on the shared post than I do if you were to just share the post outright. So sharing posts is okay. I would limit it to once a week. Obviously, it can be too easy to just share anything. And so too much of that will disengage your followers. But sharing it at least once a week is okay. And just make sure that you endorse whatever it is that's being shared. The other thing I'll mention along shared posts is as a rehab specialist, you're in a very great situation, because if you position yourself correctly, one of the things I highly recommend that you do is work with the veterinarians that are referring to you. So think about those veterinarians that are constantly referring business to you. And when you share a success story of the patient that you're able to help, that's theirs, tell that referring veterinarian, hey, I'm going to share one of your patient stories on our social media. I got permission from the owner. You might want to go to my Facebook page and share it with your followers as well. So encourage your referring veterinarians to share the content that's related to their pet stories, their patient stories, to help push your message out there to even more people at the end of the day.
And you obviously tag them in too, in the comments at the top. You can tag that practice so they know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the last thing I want to ask about Facebook is, we're obviously in this complete overload now. There's just information coming from every single place. And you are chatting about those people, all the different types of people, the ones that like, and then the ones that just scroll. And, it's one of those kind of things where sometimes you don't know whether somebody or people are actually engaging with your content or actually liking what you do, because not everyone will push the little like or the little heart and write a comment. And it also depends on what you say. And if you ask a question, you sort of, if there's an open-ended question at the end, you sometimes get a comment if you ask for people's opinions. But if you're just stating something or just showing something, then sometimes you don't get those comments. So it's quite a hard question to answer, I'm guessing. But how do you know whether your posts you're actually getting the right engagement that you want if you're not getting any likes? Is that a sign, if you've got no likes and no comments, that it's not a good post? Because I have that. Sometimes when you post something and they talk about how we are this generation of just wanting that recognition all the time, like they talk about the millennials, all that recognition. And I'm like that, I'll post and then I'll go on, I'll be like, nobody liked my post, not even a like. And then you start to feel, oh no, should I delete it? What's wrong with it? What did I do wrong?
So just real quick on that point. So there was a study that came out of the University of Harvard a few years ago, and what you're referring to. So studies prove that when we get text messages from people that we admire, or that when we get more likes on Facebook and comments on our personal social media networks, that our dopamine levels increase. According to Harvard, better than sex levels of dopamine is how much it affects us. And so there is a whole science that goes behind that and how it affects our brain. In fact, to a point to where I believe it's actually toxic. As much as I talk about the importance of being connected to social media and digital technology, and as much as my life and my career is dedicated to that, I've also dedicated a portion of my career toward educating veterinarians about the dangers of too much connectivity. And I'll be happy to share more information about this with you to share with your followers, but it's about how from time to time we need to make sure that we unplug from technology and that we don't let the technology run us, but we run it. But to answer your question, how do we determine if a posting is successful? Here's the best thing I tell practices. Don't get obsessed with how many people liked it, how many people commented, how many people shared it, how many people clicked on it. At the end of the day, what you want to look at is reaching 30 to 40% of your total number of likes. So let me explain how you determine that. So first off, determine how many likes you have on your Facebook page. If it's 100, 500, 1,000, right? So however many likes you have. Anytime that you post, at the very bottom of the post, Facebook's going to show you how many people that posting was able to reach. During a 2 to 3 week period, what you want to do is you want to look at the total number of people that you're reaching. And you can put this in an Excel spreadsheet if you want. If you click on Insights in Facebook, it'll show you kind of an average. On average, it's my opinion that practices should be reaching 30 to 40% of the total number of people that like them. And I say that because that's how you can determine at the end of the day if the content that you're delivering is engaging to most of your followers. You're never going to consistently reach 100%. That is not how Facebook is built. If you think about 2 billion users globally, and you think about how often those users are talking, you're never going to be able to cut through all of that and consistently reach 100% of the total people involved. But it's very realistic to reach 30 to 40%. I see a lot of practices that are 50 to 60%. But at the end of the day, that's how you determine if your content's engaging. If you're reaching far less than that, so say you're reaching 10% consistently, then what that tells me is that most of the content that you're delivering isn't engaging, and you should look at your strategy and see if it fits some of the criteria that we talked about. The other thing I'll mention along those lines is that if you read a lot of really any book or any publication about social media, the bar is set much lower. There are people in publications that will say it is only realistic that you're ever going to reach 5% of the total number of people that are following you. And they say that is what Facebook is doing. I can tell you 100% without any reason of a doubt, with the hundreds of practices that I work with globally on this topic, that it is very, very reasonable to reach 30 to 40% of your total audience. And one of the reasons for that is that pets are one of the most #1 talked about topics on social media. And we happen to be an industry that focuses on pets. So it's realistic, and it can absolutely be done, but also don't beat yourself up. If you have a low percentage, that's okay. That's opportunity. What can you do to do something different to try to better engage your followers? But that's the easiest thing. Don't get obsessed with all of the other data that Facebook's going to give you, because you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
That's great advice. So vet rehab is you basically go have a look how many people follow you or like you, then go and have a look at the reach and divide the reach by the number of followers times by 100. That'll give you a percentage. So you want 30 to 40%. And I mean, I'm actually really happy now because I'm thinking about my posts. And mine are probably over 50%. And obviously mine is reaching vet rehab therapists. But I mean, at times we have over 100% on some of our posts. And that's because of all the great vet rehab therapists. So all my followers and all my listeners, thanks guys for all the shares, because the vet rehab community is really great at sharing content. So thanks guys for that, because I think that's why we get the extra reach in a lot of our posts. All right, so I think we've touched a lot on Facebook and you've given us some great tips. Thank you. I want to just not too much, but just a little bit on Instagram. Instagram has always been sort of, pretty pictures. And I think that we have a great potential to be able to take awesome pictures in practice, especially because we've got 3-legged dogs, we've got paralyzed dogs, we've got dogs in water, dogs in underwater treadmills. These are all nice pictures. One of the things that comes up and that the members ask a lot is that, doesn't it get boring, and this is the same probably for veterinary practices, taking the same pictures over and over again, because we're doing the same things. So sometimes it's difficult to make things look new and exciting for the people that follow us on Instagram. Any tips on taking pictures and the best way in which we can do that to post on Instagram?
Yeah, so for me, it's important to, well, first and foremost, talk about the importance of pictures. So pictures in marketing today, whether it's social media or your website, or anywhere that you're communicating who you are, is critical. There is a study that shows that it takes the human eye 8 milliseconds to process an image, which is 13 times faster than they previously thought. That was a study that came out of MIT. And when we think about the content that draws our attention, it has to do with pictures that are engaging. So when it comes to pictures, especially for veterinary practices or rehab specialists, and when it comes to the pictures that do the best, I want to see 3 things in those pictures as consistently as possible. I want to see the human-animal bond. So I want to see the person, a pet owner. I want to see a team member with that pet. I want to see the bond that exists within there. I want to see compassion. I want to see pictures of you with that pet doing what you love best. I want to see you engaged intently in that examination, in that rehab session when you're conducting a video and you're helping, move feet along on a little treadmill. I want to see that compassion. And then I want to see culture. I want to see people working together. I want to see team members working with doctors. In the cases, if you, I know most rehab specialists might work alone, but if you have an assistant or someone that's helping you, I want to see the dynamic that exists between you two. You can hate each other for all we know, but for that picture, I want to pretend that the culture is great and that you get along really well. And if you have those 3 elements in most of your pictures, that's what we tend to see work really well, especially when it comes to images shared on Instagram. I think that the biggest issues practices make with pets is kind of somewhat of what you just outlined, is that they'll just share a picture of a dog with no one there, or a picture of a cat with no one there, or a dog in an underwater treadmill just walking, and then that's it. And so it's not that that doesn't engage, it does. It's just too much of it fails to disengage. So I want to see images that show those three things that we've talked about, because that's important. But what's also equally important is the narrative behind the image that you're sharing. So what is it that you're trying to tell me about what's happening here, and to better engage me? So if it's another dog in an underwater treadmill, then what makes this dog's story different than the last? You know, what got the dog to this point? Was it a traumatic accident? Was it the result of some sort of surgery that was needed because it was aging? You know, what's the story that got us to the point to where we are today? And that's what's going to, at the end of the day, going to engage a far number of users, especially when it relates to Instagram.
And obviously you can share the same pictures on Instagram, on Facebook, because the sizes are generally the same. They should both be square, right?
That's absolutely right. And in fact, many people don't actually know, Instagram, kind of going back to that competitive market, Instagram was its own entity, and then Facebook saw the success of Instagram, and Facebook actually acquired Instagram. So Facebook owns Instagram. So a lot of the specifications when it comes to video or images that work well on Instagram also tend to work very nicely with Facebook. One of the things I do recommend is you can link Instagram to Facebook. And so what's great about that is when you're getting ready to post to Instagram, right before you click on post, it's going to ask you, do you want to also share this to Facebook? And so at that time, you can opt to share that same content to Facebook, and it will go from Instagram to Facebook. It doesn't work the other way around. It doesn't go from Facebook to Instagram, because Instagram is pictures and short video only. You can't share links like you can, or easily share content from other sources. And so it's a great opportunity to expand your reach, because like we said, you know, most practices are only going to reach 30 to 40% of people on Facebook. So if you take that same content and also share it on Instagram, then you're going to expand the visibility of the people that are seeing that post. And if there's overlap, and what I mean by that is if I see the posting on Facebook and then I see it again on Instagram, is that going to bug me as a user? And the answer is no. In fact, from a marketing standpoint, the more that someone can see the same message, the more in tune they are to act. So studies prove that if we see something 2 to 3 times, that we're more likely to act at that point on the message. And so if I do see it again, then that's great. And that's actually not a negative thing by any means.
We're talking about the Instagram video, and you know, obviously on Facebook we can also have video, and then also YouTube. Video is something that's a bit scary, I think, for a lot of vet rehab therapists, and because, you know, we've seen some people that, you know, some big practices that have these beautiful edited videos, and we just don't have the capability to be able to do that, and trying to edit videos just takes so much time. But nowadays it's actually okay, isn't it? Just to actually just pick up your cell phone and just turn it and, you know, hold it there and take a video and post it, and it's real and you can tell the story. And we have got all these wonderful animals that we're treating, that we can take videos of, you know, in wheelchairs and with orthotics and prosthetics and things like that. So we've really got great patience to be able to take video of. And, you know, I know that in Instagram, I think you usually got 1 minute, right? So you can take a very short video. And then what is the sort of length of time that you would recommend in Facebook, and if you're doing something for YouTube? Because shorter is better at the moment. Longer videos, people just switch off and they just click on to the next one.
Yeah, so when it comes to video, so yes, you can absolutely, what's great is we have our cell phones, we can do it. There's also really nice things that practices can buy. So this is like a tripod that you can, you know, especially if you're by yourself on a rehab, or for some reason you can easily use a little tripod like this and put your phone on it, and then just kind of hook it up somewhere and it'll record what it is that you're doing. And so it makes it easy for you to shoot video. And then you can edit that same video from your phone. The best time frame when it comes to video is 2 to 3 minutes long. And the reason for that is our attention span is really short. And so the more concise that we can make the video, the more ideal that it's going to be. I see a lot of practices that can tell a nice little narrative of a pet that they're able to help in 2 to 3 minutes. That's the general rule of thumb. I will say 2 things with that. One is that if it's over 3 minutes, does that mean the video is not going to be successful? I used to tell practices, if you do anything longer than 3 minutes, the video is going to bomb. And time again, some practices have proved me wrong. I had a practice once, and this is the exception, not the rule. I had a practice once that had a video that was 30 minutes long, and it was them in the exam room covering what they would normally do during a senior wellness exam. And 30 minutes long, and the video got over 100,000 views on Facebook and tons of comments of people that didn't know. So, they were like, look at us, we're doing really well. And so that's like a mini TV episode, and that's not realistic for most practices. But that's not to say that if it's not really interesting that they're not going to engage with it. But generally, that's a very narrow exception there. So the shorter the better. When it comes to videos, what we call brand videos, so communicating who you are and what your business is about, we're getting to a point where 60 seconds is ideal. There's a really great example of a video I can share with your followers of a video that communicates who a practice is in 30 seconds and does so in a very engaging way. And what you can see is you can see people, you can see compassion, culture, the human-animal bond, but you get to hear in 30 seconds what makes this practice unique. So as we look at video, at the end of the day, the shorter the better, the more that you can narrow down and hone down your message would be ideal. So that's kind of the general rule of thumb when it comes to video, but it's scary. So, I have a lot of practices that are like, oh my God, this is extremely scary. And I get it. I think if you can master the art of taking pictures and sharing stories, and once you feel comfortable with that, then start moving into video. What can you do to apply video to that and play with it? Go out on the weekend and shoot video of your dog or your cats and edit it yourself. And then until you feel comfortable doing something for your practice.
Yeah, and I think everyone has to start somewhere. When everyone that starts is nervous. So there's no one that is ever comfortable behind a camera. Even think about myself, I obviously do loads of these kind of recordings and Facebook Lives and things. And there's always some moment where you're like, oh, what am I going to say? Or am I saying it right? And you have those little moments of, a little bit of nervousness. And so although you sometimes see people and they just look so comfortable, everyone's nervous, a little bit nervous, so it's so normal.
I'll tell you, you can put me in front of an audience of thousands of people and I don't get nervous at all. But if you sit me down and you put a camera in front of me and you ask me to talk about something, it is horrible. In fact, there's some videos online of companies that have interviewed me for various things that I will not share because you could just see how nervous I am. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. But I agree.
Eric, I have one more question for you because I think this is something that a lot of veterinary health therapists think about because we have so little time and our consults are generally so much longer than a normal veterinary surgeon. So, normally they'll have these 15-minute consults and we are treating patients sort of 45 minutes to an hour and so often back to back. And we don't, like a normal vet practice will have sort of consulting and then they'll have surgery and sometimes in between they've got a bit of time. We often just flat out the whole day. And then at the end of the day, we've got notes to write and all these things to write. And so, sometimes when you start to get a bit bigger, you start to look to try and outsource some of the admin that you're doing. And one of the things obviously that is very time consuming is our social media. And I've, in a number of times, tried to find someone when I was in practice to actually help me, and they've done social media for me, and I've always just taken it back because it just hadn't worked. What is your feeling about that? Because unless it's somebody in the practice that actually knows exactly what's going on, I find that they just actually miss the point and they don't actually get the connection that you're hoping for. How do you feel about that? Should we be doing this ourselves or one of the team? Or is this something that we could outsource and send photos to somebody, for them to post?
Yeah, this is going to go back to a point that you mentioned really early on here, and it's exactly what I tell practices. So first and foremost, when it comes to social media, if you feel like, I'll give you as many resources and tools and articles for your followers to look at for those that are interested in diving more into this and learning more about it. But at the end of the day, if you feel like you've read as much as you can read, you've attended as many conferences to learn more about this as you can, but no matter what, you still don't feel like you have time for it. My recommendation at that point is to say, then maybe social media isn't for you. Let's allocate this time doing something else that might be engaging. But the last thing that you should do is consider outsourcing this to another company or to someone that's not in the practice to do this for you. And I'll tell you, even when I founded Simply Done Tech Solutions, the company that I own, from day one, practices would ask us, Eric, you seem like you do this really well. Why don't you just do it for us? And I could have hired tons of copywriters, people to write content. I could have easily myself said, absolutely, you're busy. You don't have time for this. Give me, $100, $200 or whatever a month, and we'll do it for you. I could have easily done that. And I could be sitting in piles of cash right now for the veterinarians that would much rather do that than to do it themselves. But one, it's not a service that we offer because it's not engaging at the end. All anyone would be doing is giving money to a company that's going to fail to deliver engaging content. Because at the end of the day, social media is about you and telling the stories of the patients that you care for. And no one better than you can do that. And so a lot of times when I see practices outsource social media, I have this investment that's being made with very, very little engagement. And when I look at the return of that investment, at the end of the day, it's not one that's worth being made. So if we're not outsourcing, the best tips that I can give, and again, we don't want to outsource, is try to set something realistic up for yourself. Just like if you talk to any personal trainer or any dietitian, they always tell you, well, to eat healthy and exercise, you have to put it in your calendar. Well, this is no different. Set time aside to be able to do this. So maybe a Friday afternoon, instead of having a rehab appointment, you block off an hour to be able to take some of the pictures and the video that you've taken during the week and start to edit some of those videos and some of those pictures into engaging posts. So put time aside in the calendar. We know that most of the time you're not busy 100% of the time. Almost every veterinary business is seasonal. So when you have time that you see openings in your schedule and you're not as busy, take that as an opportunity to pre-plan some of your content. I always tell practices to have maybe a Microsoft Word document or a Google Docs document and take some of those pictures and put them in there and write up a little story about it and save that. And you might come up with 10 stories that you can now share over the next 2 to 3 months if you're only sharing 2 to 3 per week. So that way you can use that content when you're busy, and then hopefully again, you'll have more time to be able to do that. If you have people that work with you, so if you have an assistant, a technician, or a nurse, or someone that helps you, see how much of it they feel comfortable with. I know that you'd mentioned you'll end up taking it back. So maybe they're not a great writer and they can't tell a story well, but maybe they're good at taking pictures and video and getting permission from the pet owner to do that. So let them do that part, and then you can focus on the storytelling aspect of it or the educational aspect of it, or you can work together to be able to do that. Having a social media calendar. I have a whole article I can send to your listeners about how to pre-plan your social media and how a social media calendar can help. The last thing I'll say along these lines is that if you're too busy, just as I said it before, it's okay to leave it alone. It might mean leaving it alone for a day. It might mean leaving it alone for a week. But at some point you're going to have time. Use that time that you do hopefully regain to use this as an opportunity to then deliver engaging content. One of the things I can say to justify the value of this is we know it's not easy to track the return on investment with social media. We can't always directly correlate this to a new client that has come in. But the best thing I can tell you is this. Social media is a retention tool. It's about retaining more of the existing people that are coming to you. Number two is that by showcasing the level of medicine that you offer, that's a form of branding, and that's a form of communicating who you are. And as a result of that, people that are doing research about you will see these stories of the pets that you're able to help.
and they will come into you to see you for that very reason. And if you, with practices that we've worked with, we have seen a direct correlation in many instances where they do really well on social media because they have time and they do a whole bunch of great content gathering and sharing on social media, and new client numbers and everything going great. And then when they stop, we sometimes see that direct correlation and maybe not seeing as many refers from the internet than we have. So we do see those type of correlations, but at the end of the day, you have to feel comfortable with the time that you have to be able to do it. And just like anything, if you see the value in doing this, then you're going to make the time for it. But just don't go into it with an unrealistic strategy.
Eric, thank you so much for your tips and advice. For those of you that would like to follow Eric, you can follow him on @EricGarciaFL. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll put all this in the podcast notes. And for those of you that are based in South Africa, Eric's actually coming to South Africa to lecture in October at the IVPD conference. So I'll put a link of that also in the podcast notes. For those of you that are abroad and would like to come and visit South Africa, it'll be a great conference. It's a business conference that we have here. I think it's a 2-day conference. So very excited to meet you in person there in October. And I think you're going to be coming to Cape Town and Joburg. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm super excited about that. And I hope to meet some of your listeners that maybe are South African based or maybe even come over definitely during that time as well. I'm super excited.
And I hope that you're going to be going to go check out the Big Five at the same time. Go and look for animals in the wild.
I'm going to try to work on it. Unfortunately, I'm squeezing it into in a small period of 2 trips, but I'm going to do as much exploring as I can, and I'm already working to get back out there in May. So definitely we'll make time at some point as well.
Eric, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it as well. Take care.
Bye.
Rehabbers, thanks for listening to my podcast. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, and it would be great if you could leave me a review. I want to know, what are you doing on the 15th to the 17th of November? It is our Vet Rehab Summit, which is our online virtual conference for veterinary rehab professionals. Find out more information at onlinepethealth.com.